Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today at yet another webinar that MELLOHAWK has put together. And this is a very special day because it's the first series of webinars that we're doing with the Trade Commissioner Office of the Canadian government in Brazil. As you know, Canada has 5 offices in Brazil in different regions and with specialists in different areas. So we're going to bring all of them on these webinar series that we're starting today so they can bring their knowledge and information together with some key partners in Brazil to talk about the Canada-Brazil trade. So today, our webinar is called Mining Talks, Obstacles and Opportunities in Brazil. So I'm very, very happy to welcome you all here. A little agenda for today. So introduction, overview, disruptions in supply chain, obstacles and opportunities upcoming in the Brazilian mineral sector. And then we encourage you to ask questions in our chat. And at the middle of the presentation, Diego is going to post a link to our feedback questionnaire. So we ask you to all please fill it up so we know how we're doing and what topics would you like to see us in the future talk about. So I welcome my guests today. So thank you so much for being here. Franz Brandenberger, I make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly, Trade Commissioner Office in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Ana Candida from BMA in São Paulo. I think you're in São Paulo, right, Ana? Yes, which is very cold, I hear. So anyway, we are warm in Canada finally. And last but not least, the lovely Evelyn Colum, the Consul General for Canada in Rio. So thank you so much, the 3 of you, for joining us today. I'm going to start to asking Evelyn to give opening remarks. And before I do that, I want to mention to you that about Evelyn, I know many things. She's a really amazing and has an amazing career with the Canadian government. But I want to say that, and I quote, at the PDAC Brazilian Mining Day in March, Evelyn Colum spoke about the importance of women in mining and how the action plan for the advancement of women in the mining sector in Brazil is contributing to the advancement of Canada's feminist foreign policy. So thank you so much, Evelyn, for being here, and welcome. Please give us your remarks.
Okay, thank you, Arnon, for the warm welcome. So, boa tarde, bonjour, and good afternoon to all. So, on behalf of the Government of Canada, I'd like to thank MELLOHAWK and the BCCC, and also Diego and Peter, and Arnon, of course, who are coordinating this initiative, and start by saying that it's really a pleasure for me to be opening this series of webinars on Brazil. So this first webinar is on the Brazilian mineral sector. So I think it's natural that Brazil and Canada have close relations in the mining sector, since our countries are giants in that sector, and it's also a big part of our respective economies. So we've been working with Brazil, in particular in the last few years, on the digital transformation in the mining sector and sustainable mining and the advance of women in the mining sector that Arnon just mentioned, and that I will speak a little bit about a bit further in my remarks. So I'm grateful to have with us today Ana Candida from the Barbosa, Musnik and Aragon Lawyers Bureau in Sao Paulo, and Arnon Mello from MELLOHAWK, who will talk to us about the disruptions in the supply chain. And Franz Brandenberger, our Trade Commissioner from our Belo Horizonte office, responsible for the mining sector, who will present some challenges and opportunities in the local market of Brazil. So in Brazil, we have actually 6 offices. So we have our embassy in Brasilia, we have a Consulate General in Rio, and another one in Sao Paulo, and we have 3 trade offices in Recife, Belo Horizonte, and Porto Alegre in the south. So we have an excellent coverage of the country. And we have in these offices sector specialists covering various areas. So we call them trade commissioners. And we have, of course, Franz covering the mining sector, but we have also trade commissioners covering the energy sector, the ICT, the clean tech, aerospace, infrastructure, and also other sectors across the platform of the Government of Canada and Brazil. So whether you're a Canadian company who is looking to diversify into the Brazilian market, or if you're a Brazilian company looking for Canadian solutions applicable to the mining sector, you can always count on the Trade Commissioner service. So if you're interested, please contact France, and either he's going to help you himself or he's going to direct you to the Trade Commissioner that's the most relevant for your business. So since we're talking about disruptions in the supply chain, I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk to you about a very interesting initiative, and one that I've been supporting for the past couple of years, and that's the Women in Mining Action Plan for the advancement of women in the mining sector. So this plan was adapted from the Canadian plan that was developed by Women in Mining Canada, and it was adapted for Brazil. So there was a lot of workshops in Brazil with specialists to adapt the plan for Brazil. And then, you know, it was done in collaboration with many partners, including the Brazilian Institute of Mining, IBRAM, and Women in Mining Brazil, which was actually created during this initiative, and many others. So it was launched officially in March of this year. And so these periods of crises and disruptions allow us to reconsider how we're doing things. Like, who knew that a few months ago, and when I was at PDAC in early March, that we would have this, take this huge leap forward in the use of technologies, like conducting these virtual webinars with hundreds of people, and that all kids would be taking online classes from home. So, you know, we could never anticipated that. So there's this, in this period of disruptions, you know, in the supply chain in particular, I think this pandemic gives us a possibility to look at our supply chain and broaden the group of suppliers that we were using. Like, one important strategy that we included in the Women in Mining Action Plan is supplier diversity. So how can companies look at the way they do procurement and see if they could consider suppliers from a more diverse group, including companies led by women? So the plan, just while I'm at it, I'm going to continue talking about this plan for a little bit. So the plan is providing guidance to companies in the private sector to advance women within and outside of their companies. So how can they implement inclusive practices, for example, for the career progression of the women working for them? How can they organize a working environment so it's safe for women from a physical and psychological point of view? How to implement practices to allow employees to balance the work with their personal responsibilities, for example? How to attract and retain talents, and how to attract women and girls to STEM careers so you have a bigger pool of possible employees to draw from? And how to invest in communities around the mines, among other strategies. So this plan is very high quality, and I think it can help companies navigate the issue of diversity and the gender equality in the mining sector. And it's available on the Portal da Mineração. So right now it's only in Portuguese, but we are translating it, and it's going to be launched as well in English. So I'd like to finish by saying that during these challenging and uncertain times, the collaboration between Brazil and Canada is more important than ever. Our main goal here is to do this together with Canadian and Brazilian companies, suppliers, key government players, and the academia, so we can deepen the knowledge on both sides and ultimately contribute to the development of the mining sectors and other sectors in both countries. So this webinar is an excellent example of how to bring Canada and Brazil together to discuss and address priority themes such as this one, and consequently foster the development of businesses, partnerships, and corporations. So thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy the seminar.
Thank you so much for lovely remarks, and I'm so glad you covered a lot of the things that I think also is important on every webinar that we do, and also collaboration at time of COVID. That's what we found through technology, through these webinars. We're reaching people and bringing information before even the news, hit your TV screen, right? So, and the fact that you said that technology transformed our lives, and also supply chain, people are looking for other sources, right? Bringing closer to home. And most important about this series is that we want Canadians and Brazilians to understand what the Trade Commissioner Office and the Government of Canada can do for Canadian companies in Canada, going to Brazil or going to South America, because there's many offices, right, of trade commissioners all over the world. And the amount of knowledge you have and data that can help Canadian companies make a wise decision when shipping or entering a different market. So the Canada-Brazil relation is so important, and your team in Brazil is amazing. We've been working with them for many years and supporting them in many initiatives. So we felt that it was necessary for people to really understand what the Trade Commissioner Office does. So thank you for that introduction. It was great.
Thank you, Arnon.
You're welcome. And thank you for your initiative with women in mining, because as we know, many stories, right, of we need inclusion and diversity in this area for women, right, to work and feel comfortable, right, always.
That's
so
right.
anyway, I'm going to continue here. It's my turn to talk about MELLOHAWK before I introduce my speakers. So MELLOHAWK is a company that started 17 years ago. We have 150 offices and partners around the world. And we have representation of our interest in any part of the globe that anyone needs it, in any sort of air, ocean, or trucking and customs clearance. So we do a lot of work on distribution, of course, intermodal shipments. We do a lot of personal effects, believe it or not, but we are one of the few freight forwarding companies in Canada that move Brazilians back to Brazil. When the cold starts here, people want to go back to Brazil. We pack their homes and we ship them back. So we're very successful on that, working with the Brazilian government and the regulations. We do warehousing and distribution, trade shows and exhibitions. I'll talk a little bit about that, because mining has a huge component of this when you need to do repairs and move shipments on temporary basis. We have all the permits and licenses to move dangerous goods and specialty items, and transport, customs clearance as well, as I mentioned, not only in Canada, but all over the world. And last, we do a lot of planning and working with companies that have a challenge, either in Brazil or South America or anywhere in the world, to come up with the best plan to ship their products, because there's many ways to do supply chain, and you need to always have a conversation with your clients and understand what they need in order to provide the correct solution. Moving along, I like to give a little update, as we always do, about supply chain in the world. And I like to say that, well, there's many things happening. As you know, the world has been disrupted in supply chain because of COVID. Many issues with China closing for so many months, containers not leaving, which affected the flow of containers worldwide. So some markets were lacking container and equipment, so they couldn't load to export to other markets. So we see now a movement. Things are going back to normal. And there's many things that are happening with the world of digitalizing technology and documentation worldwide. So ports and shipping representatives urge faster digitalization to cope with the post-COVID new normal. As we know, we are in the midst of COVID, but we're all talking now about what's going to happen once things go back to the new normal. And the new normal in supply chain is a lot of things that we do that require still paper and original documents are being implemented and transformed, so transmissions can be done electronically of releases of cargo or releases of documentation much faster than sending a courier across the world to take a piece of document. So everyone worldwide is talking how we can make it better. We already do electronic airway bills for flying cargo to most countries. Brazil is not adapting that yet. We still need originals to Brazil, but many things are doing for us to be digital. International updates, of course, Latin American virus surge puts world's biggest mines at risk. So, of course, as COVID spreads in Brazil and South America, Some mines are being threatened to close because of their employees' exposure to the virus, and this will create a huge effect on supplying raw materials to other markets. So this is something that we are watching as well. And also remember the trade war. Well, it's not over yet between US and China. Things are still complicated. As we know, there is a big movement to bring back manufacturing to US, to North America from China. Evelyn touched on this, and I touch on other webinars that people are looking for suppliers closer to home. As we know, if a market that controls all the manufacturing of a particular product or products, it's shut down. And then, of course, those materials are going to be lacking in other parts of the world. So people are now looking for producers and supporting local products and trying to bring things closer to home, because then it will be easier for supply chain, easier to move cargo. So there is a huge movement on this as well. Another big issue, again, back to technology, is cloud adoption accelerates as companies plan for the second wave of COVID. Most of us now have been working from home. We are working here in the office. Part of the office is here, part of the office is remote, because we are essential services in Canada. We could be open from day one by the government regulations. So, but we already were on the cloud in a lot of sense, but many companies had to adapt to this new environment. And we see now that companies will continue to move everything to the cloud, all their technology and data, so they can work remotely from anywhere. And of course, expect a dramatic drop in commodity exports to China. Again, as some markets are being affected by COVID, raw materials going to China for further manufacturing, this lane could also be affected. So that's a little bit of the update. We'll be sharing this presentation with everyone that sign up for this webinar after, so you get a copy of this. I want to talk about a little bit in specific to supply chain and mining. So as you know, the transportation of mining equipment around the world is expensive and delicate. I will be making some remarks, my personal remarks about this. A lot of heavy and large equipment are loaded on ships via ro-ro or LOLO system, which means the cargo is delivered to the port and then it's driven. I'm going to call the word driven inside the ship, or some ships, depending on the size of this equipment, because they don't fit into containers that we normally know the regular size. So mining industry is sensitive and always on a deadline, of course. It's not always heavy cargo, but small parts for repair as well. We see normally big machineries, they go to a place to be used, but then parts break down, they need to be sent to origin to be repaired. In the case of Brazil, this is a very delicate situation because Brazil has a very strict policy of importing something or exporting something on a temporary basis. There is a process to this effect. It takes 15 days normally for this process to enter Brazil without paying duties and taxes. So foreigners are very concerned about this process because Brazil customs system is very delicate, very detailed. So we are very familiar with this process, so we can help you in this process. Also, there is something new in Brazil now called not the process is new, but it's the new regulation in Brazil. It's called an ATA carnet. It's a passport for goods that go for repair, and then they can enter Brazil or any country much faster than a normal temporary importation. The problem is, it is in the law in Brazil for many years now, a couple of years, and people are advertising this process, but customs in Brazil, depending on the port, is not familiar how to stamp and process the ATA carnet entering the country. So we are very familiar with this process because we went through extensive training with our customs partners in Brazil. So I'm giving you this information because that could save you time and money when sending parts for a trade show, for repair, or exiting Brazil as well. Another key component when you talk about mining or logistics in general, insurance. You must have insurance on your product because these are high value. You don't know, even though we as a transportation have insurance, anything can happen in transit. So I always advise you to pay attention to your Incoterms and have insurance. Cleaning. Some machines have soil in them as they are being shipped. So these machines or parts must be completely clean and have a certificate of cleaning, so they will be accepted into Brazil especially, or even into Canada, because soil is not allowed. They could contain bacteria or any pesticide, whatever that's going to come into the country. So dismantling and packing as well, very detailed. Please pay attention when you're doing this, dismantling or working with somebody that is doing it, because it could cause damage to your product. Documentation, of course, my advice is never, ever, ever ship anything to Brazil on any means of transport without prior confirmation and consent from your buyer in Brazil and the receiver. Brazil is not like any other country. You cannot ship something and then if you make a mistake, you're going to try to correct it in Brazil. It's not possible. Huge fines and confiscation, delays in clearance. So it's better for you to delay your shipping, fix everything with your client and their customs broker or your shipping company here at the origin before it reaches Brazil. Huge. Again, I talked about repairs and returns. We have that knowledge, so work with a company that has knowledge on that in and out, and we can send you information about the ATA carnet that I mentioned as well. Also, another huge issue is we find, and I'm going to specifically to Brazil, we see a lot of companies working directly with steamship lines sometimes to move cargo in North America or worldwide to Brazil or to some markets. And what happens in the case of very large equipment, if you're moving them from Calgary, let's say, to a port like Baltimore in the US, it goes by road. And then depending on the weight of this product, you need special licenses to travel within the US. So a steamship line will not help you with all these segments of this movement. So working with the freight forwarder is so crucial, because we can advise you what you need in terms of weight and states that you're crossing until you reach the port. And then from that point on, it will be loaded on the ship, or the buyer will have their own contract with the steamship line, no problem. But the internal movement is crucial for you to understand that it's not everyone that can obtain those licenses on behalf of the shipper. Okay. And of course, bridges, again, I wrote it down here. Sometimes the height of the equipment, depending on the route you build, is not going to go under a particular bridge. So you're going to be stuck there. So when we plan heavy machinery traveling across North America or any market, we plan the route, right? We look to see where is the height limitations as is crossing it. Also, this also applies to arrival at destination in Brazil. How it's going to get from the port to the mine. We've worked in many projects, one specifically in Bonaire, where we had to take all the equipment from Europe into the ship to be used on the local transport from the port to the mine, because the roads were absolutely terrible. And, you know, these equipments travel like 15 kilometers an hour on this road until we reach the mine. So it was fascinating what's available to be shipped and used. So this is just some insights for you. We value partnership with everyone. We have the knowledge to help you, not only in Brazil and South America, but all over the world. So we urge you to always consult with your logistics provider. If it's not us, we hope to be. But if you're not, again, for Brazil, never ship anything without pre-approval of your clients. Now, I talked too much, so now I would like to present to you Franz, who is going to give an introduction about the Trade Commissioner Services in Brazil. So Franz, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Arnon. Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Peter, for inviting us, the government of Canada, to join you for this series of webinars about Brazil. So it's a great pleasure to be here today and to showcase a little bit about the Brazilian mining sector. So we are here to help Canadians to do business in Brazil and to increase their exports to Brazil. As said by Evelyn, we have 6 offices across the country. We have specialists in each one of the sectors. So we are here to help Canadians to develop business here and export. That said, I will, could you change the slide, please?
Sure, sorry. Next one.
Next one. So I'm going to start my presentation saying that Brazil and Canada are natural partners, at least in the mining sector, where both countries have a lot of synergies. As you can see in the slide, Brazil and Canada have to balance mining and environmental stewardship. In the case of Canada, we have the Arctic zone. In the case of Brazil, we have the Amazon region. As well, both countries have First Nation communities as stakeholders in mining. It's important to note that the bilateral trade and investment is largely dominated by minerals. As an example, Canada is the top one for gold and vanadium production in Brazil. Brazil is the top one nickel producer in Canada. Since the acquisition of the Canadian company Inco by Vale almost 15 years ago. So it's also important to mention that both Brazil and Canada passed through major mining disaster in the last decade. Also, the fact that we had mining reform in both countries in order to attract further investments to the mineral sector. Next slide, please. So just in order to better explain to you the ups and downs in the Brazilian mineral production, I would like to showcase the most important facts in the past 10 years that have impacted mining sector in this country. So from 2011 until 2016, the Brazilian mineral output dropped from 53 billion to 24 billion US dollars. The main reasons were the lack of a mineral code in place that caused a lot of legal uncertainties. And finally, the major dam burst that took place in Mariana in November 2015. This catastrophic incident reaped a lot of lives and damaged the environment, of course. Between 2016 till 2018, we had a light recovery of the Brazilian mineral production that raised from 24 to 34 billion US dollars. I should mention that we had in that period the approval of a new mineral code in 2017. However, and because of the presidential elections that took place by the end of 2018, we still had some legal and political uncertainties. Then we got our second mining disaster in Brumadinho in January 2019 that again impact the growth of the Brazilian mineral output. Even with a new mineral code and a new government in place, we reached to a total mineral production of 38 billion US dollars only. The second disaster in Brumadinho reaped as well a lot of lives and impacted the environment drastically, placing in the minds of everyone a big question mark about the safety of mining operations in Brazil. The mining sector reacted quite fast to this second disaster in order to respond to these inquiries and doubts of the Brazilian society and government about the safety of mining operations in Brazil. Mining companies established in Brazil took a lot of measures since then to make mining operations safer and healthy. We are actually facing our third wave, the COVID-19 pandemic crisis in the sector. What is going to happen in the Brazilian mineral sector? What will be the Brazilian mineral output by the end of 2020? Well, these are very difficult questions to answer for the time being. However, I can say that the performance of the mining sector in these coming months will depend on how fast private companies and government will react to this challenging scenario and take the appropriate measures to relaunch the sector. Next slide, please. So in order to give you some stats of the Brazilian mineral sector, I should say that Brazil is one of the world's leading mineral producing nations and a major importer and exporter of minerals. Although being a large country, mine lands correspond to 0.5% of the Brazilian territory only. The country produced some 70 different minerals in over 9,400 mining exploration companies. However, the mining sector in Brazil is dominated by a small number of large mining companies. We have a total of 154, or only 2% of the country's mining players. So Brazil is the top one in the world in the production of niobium, the top 3 in iron ore and graphite, and the top 7 in bauxite, kaolin, vanadium, for instance. As already said, country's mineral production was $38 billion last year. Iron ore accounted for almost 59% of the country's mining production that was undertaken by Vale and its subsidiaries. We do have mainly open pit mines in Brazil, and these mines are for iron ore exploitation and few underground mines for gold and coal ore exploitation mainly. Although the fact we have mines all over the country, the states of Minas Gerais and Pará are the 2 most important mineral producers in Brazil. The state of Minas Gerais is also a home for many manufacturers, services suppliers, engineering companies, all of them doing business in the Brazilian mining sector. Due to the sheer size of the country, Brazil offers, of course, a lot of opportunities for mineral exploration, as well as for mining manufacturers of equipment and services. The mining sector in Brazil generated last year almost 200,000 direct jobs and 2 million indirect ones. It is also relevant to mention to all of you that we have a mining innovation hub located in Minas Gerais. This mining innovation hub is composed by 24 members approximately. These are large mining operators, and this innovation hub is focused on innovative technologies and solutions applicable to the mining sector. Next slide, Arnon, please. So a bit about mining trade independences. As you can see in the slide, Brazil is an important mineral player, exporting and importing a lot of minerals. So just to give you an idea, Brazil exported last year 32.5 billion and imported 8.2 billion US dollars. The most exported minerals were iron ore and gold, and the major imports were potash and coal ore. The COVID-19 impacted the Brazilian export and imports, so the country recorded less revenues in the first quarter of 2020 when compared to the same period of last year. Furthermore, the Brazilian mineral exports dropped by almost 1%, and the imports dropped by 8%, or the equivalent of less 1 million tons of coal, potash, copper, and zinc in particular. Next slide, please. Well, let's talk a bit about the impacts. So the mineral sector is being impacted worldwide, like everyone else, by the new COVID pandemic, thus impacting commodity prices, mineral production levels, and direct investments, among other factors. The Brazilian mineral sector wasn't an exception. We had a great impact by the virus. So in order to alleviate the burden on mining companies, as well as to mitigate the negative impacts of the COVID-19 on the whole supply chain, the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy announced this past March the ministerial ordinance number 135 that upgraded the mining sector status to essential. Unlike other countries such as Peru, South Africa, or Argentina, for instance, the Brazilian government allowed miners to keep their operations underway, even during the quarantine period. Although all these government measures in order to mitigate the negative impacts due to the COVID-19, the country's mineral production dropped almost 18% in the first quarter of 2020 when compared to the same period of the previous year. The fall in the country's mineral production was mainly due to the heavy rains that hit Brazil at the beginning of this year, the slowdown in the world economy, and uncertainties in financial markets, of course, in addition with the to the COVID-19 outbreak. As stated by the Industries Federation of the state of Minas Gerais, greenfield and expansions in the Brazilian mining industry have been in their majority all postponed, with a potential drop of up to 45% in the Brazilian mineral production in 2020. According to the World Bank, the Brazilian GDP will drop by 5% in the same period. So a gradual recovery of the mining sector is not expected before 2021. Although and despite all these drops in the Brazilian mineral production, export, and imports, mining companies doing business in Brazil paid a total of $250 million in mining-related taxes. In the case of Brazil, we call CEFEM, in this first quarter of 2020, well above the amount collected in the same period of last year. Still, as a positive point, the Brazilian Mining Association forecasted total investments of $32.5 billion in the country's mineral production, in the country's mineral sector in 2020-2024 period. Next slide, please. So what will be the next steps in the mine sector? Of course, the major mining disaster in Brazil in conjunction with the COVID-19 pandemic have definitely impacted the Brazilian mining sector and its whole supply chain. However, this challenging scenario provoked a revolution that is currently underway in the Brazilian mineral sector. I'm talking about the Industry 4.0 and the increase of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, big data, remote control systems, all these technologies in order to make mining operations more profitable, to increase productivity, as well as to mitigate environmental impacts. So based on the World Economic Forum and Accenture, the following amounts have been estimated as a result of the digital transformation in mining by 2025. The amount generated for business, clients, society, and environment will be roughly $425 billion. The gains from reduction of CO2 emissions will amount to 610 million tons, or the equivalent of $30 billion. The digital transformation new cycle will save at least 1,000 lives and will avoid 44,000 accidents involving injuries in the mining industry. Of course, with the digital transformation process underway, the World Economic Forum estimates as well a potential loss of 330,000 jobs in the mining sector, or nearly 5% of the workforce in the sector. These will require new strategies from the Canadian and Brazilian mining companies in order to mitigate all negative economy and social impacts of the automation, in mining. Next slide, please. So just a bit about the opportunities. I would like to share with you the slide and some opportunities in every one of these subsectors in the mining sector. So in terms of equipment, I might say that Brazil is home to a number of equipment manufacturers. We have approximately 7,500 manufacturers already established in Brazil. These manufacturers supplied the market an estimated $19 billion in 2018. Yet a robust and competitive market, this mining sector imported roughly $1 billion in the same year, mainly for heavy equipment for sorting, screening, separating, washing, crushing, greening, mixing, airborne survey systems, spare parts such as diamond tools, core beads, drill rods, casing shoes, drill rigs, and dredging pumps. As for exploration, I would mention that the mining sector is capital intensive and projects mature on the medium to long term. A study done by the Brazilian Mining Association last year forecasted potential investments of $32.5 billion between 2020-2024 period in this country, mainly for bauxite, gold, diamond, iron ore, and manganese projects. In terms of clean tech and ICT opportunities, I would say that the intensification of automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, integrated systems, and so on in the mining sector are fundamental to increase productivity and make mining operations more profitable at the same time. The Brazilian mining industry is in search of new technologies, such as big data solutions, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, remote control, real-time monitoring systems, plant automatized control systems, digital twin solutions, disruptive technologies, image analysis systems, all of them to make mining safer and more productive. As for services, I would say that licensing and approval process are overly bureaucratic in Brazil, in particular after the major tailing dam failures that resulted in a strengthening of environmental laws and policies in this country. Brazilian licensing bodies became much more restrictive regarding the approval of new mineral projects, as further requirements have been put in place since 2015 to protect the environment. So foreign engineering firms are very welcome to introduce new construction technologies to local companies through partnership agreements in order to secure and speed up the approval of mining licenses in Brazil. Also important, Brazil government banned new upstream dams and forced mining companies to go into a decommissioning process of the existing upstream dams in Brazil. We have more or less 84 upstream dams in a total. We also have a large number of mining dams, I would say over 200 mining dams in Brazil, that have been classified as high risk by the Brazilian National Agency and in need for structural and engineering works. So there is a lack of capable engineering companies in Brazil able to undertake engineering works in a so large number of mining dams. Just to conclude on opportunities, we have organized in 2018 and 2019 two major events in the Brazilian mineral sector. We also have prepared an Industry 4.0 report on the mineral sector. All of this in order to uncover the procurement needs of approximately 30 mining companies operating in Brazil. these procurement needs are related to digitalization, automation, remote control systems, big data, IoT, artificial intelligence, and a bit of clean tech solutions demanded by local miners. So I would like to suggest to all Canadian suppliers offering IT solutions as well as clean tech solutions to contact me afterwards in order to discuss further about opportunities in this local mineral sector. Please, next slide, Arnon. So I am almost done, but before to conclude my presentation, I would like to share with the participants my coordinates in Brazil and to reinforce to them that I am available to discuss about opportunities in this local mineral sector, as well as to liaise all these Canadian companies to my colleagues in Brazil. We are sector specialists, so don't worry. If you would like to discuss with anyone else, I will connect you with my colleagues in Brazil. I would like to thank you, Arnon, again, very much for this time, and I will be at your disposal to respond to any inquiries. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz, so much. My God, such useful information. There's so much knowledge that the Canadian offices have in Brazil, and those are not only the data, but also your contacts. I know through other clients that came to your office that you know, for example, if a Canadian company is trying to form a partnership in Brazil or validate a potential buyer in Brazil, the Canadian office has also all that information on their database. They can also work with a Canadian company to find matches in Brazil for a particular technology or product. So I encourage everyone to always contact everyone in Brazil at the trade office and exchange ideas or put on the table what they're expecting and have a conversation with you. So thank you so much. Now I would like
absolutely right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's about partnership, right? Always.
Right.
You need to have people on the ground that understand what you might be facing and answer some of your questions before even you dream about a potential deal. So it's nice to have a solid base of support. So thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
Now, and I'm sorry that we're taking a little longer, but there's so much information in this webinar. I want to welcome Ana Cândida from BMA Barbosa Mushni Aragão. I hope I said that correctly, Ana. So thank you so much for joining us. So please, we look forward to your remarks because you bring a whole different set of information that is so crucial as well to help, again, Canadian companies deal with the issues legally in Brazil.
Yes, thank you so much for having me for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I will just briefly introduce the firm. BMA is a full-service law firm, which is very useful for any foreigner doing business in Brazil. And also we very much navigate the whole legal landscape in Brazil, regardless of the sectors. We consider ourselves a very innovative firm and also cutting edge in terms of the types of transactions that we have put in place and assisting our clients to put in place. So it's just a brief remark on who we are and what we can do for you. My background is on public law, so regulatory framework is something that I'm very used to deal with. And today, usually the lawyers are thinking about problems and bringing perspectives on negative aspects of what you can face in terms of risks. So today I try to bring a positive approach based on what Franz was saying, that we have so many opportunities that are actually arising from this moment of crisis. And I try to think on what could be the trends that we will see in the mining sector based on how Brazil reacted to the COVID pandemic and what were the main topics of the pandemic. So I would start with something that Franz actually mentioned during his presentation, which is how the COVID regulations put in place by our government were actually supporting the continuity of mining activities and therefore of the whole supply chain of that industry. By the end of March, what we saw was a movement from the federal government to implement a framework that would allow some of what they called essential services and activities to be continued despite of the whole border closures and sanitary restrictions that were put in place, especially by local governments. So there was an effort made by the federal government to put in place a framework that would allow some of the activities considered essential to continue. And how did the regulation framed what should be considered essential service? Basically, they said everything that is indispensable to supply the unavoidable needs of the communities. Conceptually, that sounds right. And then they also complemented that concept, saying that also the accessory and support activities that allowed that main service to be put in place would also need to be preserved. Otherwise, you have the mining companies trying to keep on mining, but their suppliers are not working and are not allowed to transport goods or services. And then this would compromise the essential activity to be continued. So that was the main rule that was brought by the Brazilian government. It was done through the decree 10202. And right after that, of course, they also tried, along with that decree and concept, to bring a list of activities that would be an example of such essential services. And right after that first decree was enacted, some of the industries were claiming to be recognized as essential activities based on the concept. And the mining industry was one of them. So along with the decree, the Ministry of Mines and Energy enacted this ministerial ordinance that said that mining activities should be preserved, and the wording is actually mining, processing, production, commerce, transport, and supply of mineral goods should be preserved and considered essential. And 1 month later, the decree, the original decree that set the framework, was amended to declare mining activities also within the list of examples, of main examples of those activities, which is, I would say, which was very important to the mining industry. You know that not only in Brazil, but in any jurisdiction, even if the law says something or the regulation says something, you also have the possibility of discussing that in courts. And what happened here was kind of a contradiction between the local regulations, which were establishing sanitary restrictions for activities generally, and the federal regulation, which said some services must go on and must continue. And so the higher courts were called to discuss the matter. Many precedents were being produced by local courts and regional courts. And by a certain point, this really was an issue from a legal standpoint. But then by the time the federal decree included the mining activity within the list of activities, then I guess the controversy was less of a problem, less of an issue. And what we saw was that most of the companies that were battling to keep on working were allowed to do so. So this is the main, I would say, that the first trend, which is the regulatory trend, which is positive and particularly protective of the mining sector. The second trend I would like to comment, and I didn't really include in the slide any comments about this because I think it's more of a concept. It's the importance, and I think Franz also mentioned that, the importance of local, of geography in the whole business of mining after the whole pandemic. Because by the time you have such restrictions on transport of the border closures, the protocols for sanitary care, and so far and so on, we realized how big the world was. It seemed so small one day before the quarantine was declared, right? And how being local could be helpful in terms of reaching the right customer, or making your product available. So in terms of supply chain, I think that is it's a very important perspective. And I think that now when we start discussing the border openings, and I don't think we will have a full opening of the borders anytime soon. So we will take it slow. Governments will make decisions step by step, and that will also influence timing of businesses, of course. We start to maybe perceive a trend in companies making decisions of going places and setting their businesses somewhere to make sure that their products or their services will be getting to whoever they want to get to. And that actually brings the perfect intro to the last trend that I would comment, which I think is something called social licensing. The more important local gets, and we know that in mining that has always been an issue, right? The insertion of the mining activities in local communities, and the impacts that the positive and negative, whatever impacts the mining activities bring, and also the geographic location, because you need transport, you need logistics. That is an essential part of mining. If you don't have logistics, you don't have mining. So the realization of the importance of local also increases, in my view, the light into something called the legacy, right? So if you're concerned about connecting the mining activity right, and also mapping the impacts that the activity will have, and also in channeling correctly all the positive impacts that you can cause in the community, then you also are concerned about your legacy. And by being concerned about your legacy, you can, for example, thinking about Brazilian regulations and the structure of how mining projects are set up, I think that the environmental licensing process is a door to that discussion. And what we have seen is that authorities in Brazil are more and more concerned on I forgot the word in English, but it's contrapartidas, the give back, the parcel of giving back that the company will have to, for instance, make some investments in the city, or in the counterbalance.
Yeah, something. Perfect. Yeah, to this effect. Yeah.
Yes, that it really expresses it. So by allowing the activity to be developed through the environmental licensing, the government opens the door to counterbalancing measures that the mining companies and their supply chain companies may bring to the community. And another aspect of that is also that we have seen, as lawyers, companies concerned in having some values in terms of how they see their legacies included in their internal regulations and policies. And by doing so, they are also starting to think about who they're bringing in their business in terms of those values, compatibility with those values, and how the supply chain or the suppliers that this company is hiring will add to those values, and what is the main perception that brings, and the main effectiveness of those values that you can add by bringing the right suppliers to the businesses. So this is something I tried not to be very legal, but this is something that has an expression in legal documents and building the business and regulations. So this is my contribution here when thinking what's the future after this whole crisis, and how will the business react and develop despite or even based on what happened during this period, right?
Amazing. And I like to say that it's as I follow your train of thought, right? So from a simple thing of being essential service, right? Going from that perspective, and a discussion about that, because of COVID, of course, it opened the door to so many different aspects that people didn't think before, or maybe they thought before, but they actually didn't put any effort into it, like to adjust or to think about the environment or the community and source locally and their partners' impact on their company vision or plan. So I think people say, yes, COVID is very negative. It's a terrible thing that happened. But I also think it opened the door for us to think of strategies and different ways of seeing a problem and pushing that envelope to solve those problems. And I'm a positive person. I like to look at that way. And thank you for explaining it so clearly, because I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure that in Brazil, being a lawyer in Brazil already, it's very complex, right? It's complex around the world, but so anyway, it was great to follow your analogy and example. So thank you so much. I mean, so much information.
Thank you.
I am glad we're recording this webinar so people can watch it after and also give their comments. So yes, please.
If I may, I would just like to make one comment about what Ana Cândida said. Mining companies, Canadian mining companies operating in Brazil, they are all doing a lot of things outside their core business, and one of this is a social. They do a lot of things in order to bring benefits to their local communities. So during the pandemic crisis, they donated a lot of masks, they equipped hospitals, they built roads, they built water treatment stations, they built schools, all in order to improve the quality of the life of their neighboring communities. So it's not their business. What they do, mining, but speaking socially, they are doing a lot. And we are well known in Brazil by being very good corporate social responsibility companies.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it opened the door for people to say, what does the community need the most now? What can I do now to help? And it's so nice to see those examples, right? It doesn't matter where you are, that people realize that they have to help, right? So it's great to hear that it is happening. Okay, so we have some questions. So thank you again, Anna and Franz. And oh, sorry, before we go to questions, I want to do a summary, quick summary, and then we'll go to the questions, because then we're free to end. So again, the Trade Commissioner Services in Brazil is ready to help you on your exports. So use their services all over Brazil. Again, you can use Franz as a point of contact, right? And then he would direct you to the right office or right industry. So the mining sector in Brazil has been impacted by COVID, not only in Brazil, but around the world, as we heard. There are still opportunities in Brazil, particularly in the innovative and ICT solutions applicable to the mining sector. So if Canadian companies are listening, get on the phone, send an email to France, let's open the dialogue, right? A report has been done recently by the trade services to uncover the procurement needs of over 25 mining exploration companies doing business in Brazil for automation, digitalization, remote control systems, artificial intelligence, IoT, big data, and a few other solutions. So again, ask the questions and send your ideas to the Trade Commissioner offices so you can have that. And also talk to Ana Candida as well about the regulations that you're facing, because I'm sure she will be able to guide you in this field especially, right? And of course, supply chain continues to be unpredictable. For us here has been every 24 hours. We hear the news, we hear an airline canceling flights or changing routes. So keep in touch with your logistics provider, because sometimes we know more before it hits the news than when you hear at a newscast. We know already what happened at a particular lane. So thank you. So now we'll go to some questions that some viewers sent us ahead of time. And of course, we're welcome to ask here. I will start with a question from Fabio Gomez from São Paulo. He asked about, with regards to the main export products from Brazil to Canada, the transformation industry leads the way, followed by agriculture and livestock category, and third by the extractive industry. With the pandemic reaching all segments in Brazil and Canada, is there any new focus on these markets? I can make a comment here, what we have been seeing from Brazil. Of course, those markets, the commodities you mentioned are still important and valid, and they continue to move. But we see a huge importation of food products, and Brazil is very rich on different innovative, organic, milk-free products that are entering North American market, and we see those companies purchasing those products in Brazil. So I see during the pandemic a lot of food-related items, and innovation in food has been something that came up. I don't know if Franz or Anna, you have any comments to add to this, but that's what I have seen it. And then Franz, I think you have also a question, I think that was sent to you that you can comment on it.
Yes. Well, I had a question from, can I mention the name of the company?
Yes.
So I had a question from Canada Pump and Power. He would like to know how they could showcase their autonomous dredge, pump, and survey technology in Brazil. So I would say that the best way to showcase your equipment or technology in Brazil will be through a participation in a major trade shows. We have planned to participate in 3 major trade shows in the mine sector in Brazil this year. But because of the COVID, these trade shows have been postponed or canceled. So the first one, Cimexmin, has been canceled. The second one, Brasmin, will take place in Goiás in October. I've never been to that trade show. It's a medium-sized trade show. They will attract mining exploration companies and equipments. And I would suggest you to contact the organizer just to check how much does it cost, one booth or a private presentation during the trade show days. That will be a very nice platform to showcase your equipment. The second and most important trade show we are planning to attend will be Expo Zibram, that will take place by the end of the year in November in Belém do Pará. I know, Brazil is a large country. Belém do Pará is far away from Belo, São Paulo. It will bring you a lot of logistic problems. It will be much more costly to go up north in Brazil, but this will be the major trade show. also attracting a lot of mining exploration companies and equipment. So I would strongly suggest you to contact the organizers and check the costs for exhibiting, to have a booth, or to participate in a trade panel. From the Government of Canada point of view, I've started thinking new ways to highlight or to disseminate Canadian expertise in Brazil during the pandemic crisis. So I'm going to organize a lot of webinars. We could organize one webinar with your company in one side. In the other side, we are going to have a lot of mining exploration companies, and you are going to have your pitching time to explain and showcase your product in Brazil. So these are the ways we could help you. Of course, we could liaise you as well with major mine exploration companies in Brazil. We could put you in contact with good lawyers, good brokers, good agents, distributors, whatever. So please get in contact with me, and thank you for sending us this question.
Perfect. Yes.
I have
Jeremy,
a second question.
Yes, Jeremy Leonard. So thank you so much for this question about the pump and power. Yes. Yes, Franz, you have another question. Yes.
So I got a second question from Yaron Etzion. I'm not sure I pronounced your name correctly, but sorry about that. Is the company Growing Green Energy, and he was interested in selling energy storage solutions to Brazil mining industry. And he asked us if this is relevant. If this is relevant, I would say that energy storage solutions is a very relevant matter to all mining companies operating in Brazil these days. First of all, the cost of energy in Brazil is very high, definitely impacting all mining operations over here. Second, because of the environment. Our major energy metrics comes from water. As we had short rains in the past 5 years, the level of the water reservoirs in the country is a concern. And by consequence, how companies are using the water. So this explains why mining companies are moving towards dry stacking systems or recycling water or thinking about new storage energy solutions to respect the environment and to become more and more efficient on the usage of the water. Major companies such as Vale, Nexa, Anglo Gold, Anglo America, Kinross, and others, they are all looking for this kind of solution. By the way, we have a mining innovation hub, as I said in my presentation, based in Belo Horizonte. And this mining hub, as well as the mining company Nexa, they have already launched a bidding process to find out solutions to save water in mining operations. So for those foreign companies willing to start doing business over here, I have to say that Brazil is not an easy country to do business in. We have a lot of competitors already established in the country. We have a very complex taxation system. And finally, we don't speak English. Also important, Brazilian companies, they prefer to source locally in order to avoid high taxation, sending money abroad, and in particular, to secure a quick maintenance for their systems and technologies. So how to enter the Brazilian market? If you really have a unique solution in the world, I would say you can try to export directly to Brazil. But if you don't have any unique solution, if you have a lot of competitors, I would say that you should find a local partner, an agent or a distributor, or even a company just to partner with you in this local market. In doing that, you are going to save a lot of money and you are going to mitigate your risks to enter to the Brazilian market. So that's my key tips for you. We are here to help you to enter, to penetrate the market. We can forward to you a short list of potential agents, potential local representatives. We could send to you a lawyer bureau to help you navigate the Brazilian legislation system. So we are here to help you, but don't try to export your product directly to Brazil without checking the market, checking if you have competitors, and checking other alternatives. The best way is to be here. Yeah. Brazil loves to shake hands. Brazil loves to receive your regular visit at the company. Brazil loves to know that if they need you, you are going to give them a quick maintenance. So you have to be here. Correct. And to import from Canada, it's a long process, a costly process. Arnaud knows a lot about that, of course, but it takes some time to import any product to Brazil. So the best way is to be here through a local partner to mitigate your risks in this local market. That's my advice. If you would like to discuss further on that opportunity, it will be a pleasure to help you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. Thank you, Franz, for the comment. I have a question for Anna, actually, if I can. In your opinion, has it been more difficult or less difficult because of COVID to navigate the legal system and help your clients deal with challenges that arise from COVID, like essential services or challenging the government in some issues? What is your reflection on how it has been the market in this sense?
Very good question. Actually, what we've seen is that there is a huge number of new laws and regulations being enacted every day. Congress has been very, very active. Of course, it had to, because we needed to react and implement the right legal framework to deal with the COVID situation. So I have a team, just to give you a number, I have a team, one member of my team is 4 hours per day, every day, since the beginning of March, second week of March, dedicated to map laws and regulations enacted by government to deal with the COVID. So only search words based on COVID and you know, the sanitary restrictions. That means probably around 300 new pieces of rules and regulations per week. So it is really, really hard to navigate. Even for us lawyers, we have been struggling because every day you wake up and you have to read the official gazette to make sure that the opinion you gave yesterday doesn't need to change today. But another side of it, and especially thinking about government contracts and approvals and permits, in that sense, I think there was an easier path because government pretty much declared all permits and authorizations that had been issued before COVID extended to make sure that people wouldn't spend their energy during the crisis dealing with bureaucratic proceedings to keep their authorizations and permits in place. So that is one good side of it. And the second good side of it is that, especially looking into government contracts, government has been really in the room, ready to discuss, available to think about solutions. And that is an amazing part of this whole situation. You know, cooperation is a key word of what we can see in terms of government approach to issues at this point, and I guess worldwide, but especially when you look into regulatory agencies, the tendency, at least based on history of how regulatory agencies were built in Brazil, you could see that they were much more the inspector and the opposing party to whatever businesses were developing than a real partner. And I think it will change, and I'm very hopeful that this will change, because I've been discussing many issues with regulatory agencies, and their approach is collaborative, and this is great.
Good. That's really good news. And my God, I can just imagine the amount of work, right? Okay, thank you so much. I have a last question for Franz. We're going to try to answer very fast because I know we're over. I apologize to everyone, but there's so much information and so interesting information from our guests that it's kind of hard to close this. But anyway, last question for Franz is, Franz, do you know of all the companies that are doing solution mining in Brazil? And I'm sure that this is from Anthony Kahn is asking this, and I'm sure he can contact you as well later. But any remarks on this?
To be very fast on that, yes, I know. Please get in contact with me. We can discuss
Perfect.
In a private way. So, but we know about that. So please get in contact with us in Brazil.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry, everyone, that we took so long. I want to thank you again, everyone, for being here today. Evelyn Colum, thank you for your remarks and opening this series of webinar. Franz Brandenberger, thank you for always being there for us when we have questions. And Ana Candida, thank you so much for your input and participating. I hope to count on you on other webinars. You're always welcome, all of you. And I thank you all, the audience who participated. You're going to get copies of the presentation, and please contact the Trade Commissioner officers in Brazil, any of them, Franz especially, and he'll guide you to wherever you have to go. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. Be safe and be protected. And I will see you again here on our next webinar, which is also going to be with the Trade Commissioner office. So again, thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Franz. Thank you, Anna. And thank you, everyone, for watching.